What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be breaking down the CBS's brand new 2025 NFL mock draft. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Below my face is my board. It is an honest opinion about every single player, and those honest opinions will be subject to an entire year of testing, so I'm very excited for that because you guys will be able to watch its evolution throughout the whole entire time. It is there for transparency. Below my board is all the great ways to get involved in the community. It's just very super easy. Go to the description, click that link tree. You get access to all of our socials. I'm the only one who does this, but also our two sponsors of the show in UnderDog Fantasy, as well as Olipop. Shout out to UnderDog. They're going to be doing some crazy deals, including boosting the free bonus cash all the way up to $1,000 from $250, which is nuts. So take advantage of that. I don't know how long it's going to be here. They have, fluctuated their terms before, and this is probably the best I've ever seen. So use that link. It will end up putting my code in for you. You don't have to put any of that work in there, and enjoy it. They have NCAA season bets, even MLB, UFC. It's pretty sick. So let's get right into this, though, because I want to get to the gym and lift. That's why I end up looking like Goat House today. So if you guys were wondering why I end up looking like a damn hobo, your boy wants to get a nice little tri day in. It's not just triceps. We all know that you can't overload one position or one muscle group. And round number one, though. Is this going to be 2 rounds or something? If it is, then we're still going through it. This is a live reaction. Carson Beck, number 1 overall. I mean, this is the 2022 quarterback class, in my opinion, pretty much all over again in terms of, we're going to be hyperinflating the value of these quarterbacks comparatively to last year's class. Beck would have been probably at best quarterback 6 or 7. So not really the number 1 overall pick, in my opinion, but still some solid talent there. I mean, 6 or 7 is still a very good class, and for a group of guys who ended up, I think it was 5 guys in the first round. So, he is somebody who I think should be a fringe one. And at number 1 overall, different standard, but the Giants need a QB. So I'd be more on the Connor Wigman route, even though Connor Wigman is graded lower than Beck. It's also because of health. But Mason Graham is pick number 2. A defensive interior, to me, just unless you really are in that Quinn Williams, in that Aaron Donald, I know there's still a tier gap between those two, but, we're talking about the upper echelon of guys, Jalen Carter. That's where you should be considered in the top 3 to 5. I don't see Mason Graham as that, but I really hope that he ends up developing to be that type of player again. I'm looking at what the players are now and praying that they end up getting better. And Mason Graham, I could easily see doing that. Of course, new defensive coordinator. We'll see what happens. Pick number 3, you got Kelvin Banks to the Panthers. So one of the first mocks I've seen where the Panthers are not the number 1 overall team. So at least there's that. That's cool. I assume there was a trade. So yeah, there's a mock trade right here. They didn't even really make it very obvious, but I mean, who gives a shit? I mean, they're trading up even worse for a quarterback that wouldn't have been taken anytime else. But, we'll leave that comment there. Kelvin Banks, it could be theoretically at the offensive line, Ike Ekwonu just cannot play left tackle. Kelvin Banks, I don't have much more confidence in him than I did Ike coming out. So I'll leave it at that point. But, Kelvin Banks Jr. still is going to be a very veteran, very talented left tackle with some guard potential based on the fact he's 6'4". Pick number 4, Will Campbell, is part of a trade back as well for the Patriots. I think that's a phenomenal move. It's a move that I just made. I ended up putting out my own mock draft with trades, so feel free to check that out. At pick number 5, Mikael Williams going to the Tennessee Titans. You can definitely tell with where certain teams see their lacks of depth and their overall weakness based on some of the positions they're releasing versus actually trying to pick up on the waiver wire. If you guys wanted to see a video about that, I debated it, but to be honest, there's so many moves that are not representative of the waiver wire. Who gives a shit? You guys can end up reading that in 20 seconds and understanding it versus 1,000 players getting released. I think it was a little bit more important for me to do that video, but regardless, the Titans did look to have a focus on edge rusher, and it does look like Mikael Williams could be right up their alley. Very athletic, great build. He was really talented there in high school as well, hoping that he ends up polishing throughout the year. Will Johnson ends up being the 6th overall pick to the Washington Commanders, pairing him up there with Mike Samer still. Why not I wish people mentioned the fact when they put Will Johnson with Mike Sainristil that they're putting them back together. Like, that's the coolest storyline. Who gives a shit that Will Johnson's the best player? It's still a fun storyline. But regardless, Will Johnson to me is comp to an alien, and he really is the best player I've probably ever studied. James Pierce is pick number 7 for the Arizona Cardinals. As he's a twitchy edge rusher who needs to still polish up his game. I do think he's better than Mikael Williams. I'll just say that. So people think I don't like James Pierce. I mean, it's Mikael Williams I'm probably far lower on than anybody. But James Pierce is somebody who I am just more realistic. He's my 32nd overall player. I do like what he brings to the table. However, I'm also very realistic with the fact that, he's still very, very much polishing his game. Hello. So James Pierce, I just don't know if he is going to, at that frame, you're starting to get really thin at edge rusher, but it's going to be hard to get much worse. So it's like, for me, I'd be going Nick Scourton in a heartbeat, but I also understand, you just got Darius Robinson. Do you want another guy who's around 280? That's going to be a question you'd have to answer. At pick 8, there's Shedeur Sanders going to the Saints. Y'all just know me. I'm not high on Shedeur Sanders. Like, it is what it is. Some dumbass really wanted to pull the racist card. Like, please. Like, just check yourself before you wreck yourself, bro. I mean, people who try to pull that card are absolute dumbasses. And, it just reminds us to appreciate those in our lives that are not dumbasses. So, Shedeur Sanders, it's okay for me to have an opinion. I just am not a super huge fan. And it's not like I don't like Shedeur Sanders. There's just a difference. I continue to bring this up with Carson Beck as well, who I do like. Like, when you're talking about somebody being a franchise level quarterback, which is usually what a top 10 pick is supposed to be, there's a different standard compared to, are you a solid quarterback? Which he is. Like, he is a solid quarterback. Is he a top 15 quarterback in the NFL? That's something you have to ask yourself, because those are the franchise style quarterbacks. If you're below that, you're most likely still in the question as to whether you should be even on the team if a better opportunity arises. So, again, that's why, like, people think that my hate for Shedeur Sanders, like, my hate is blown out of proportion. It's not. It just really is based on the reference of the frame that we're putting him in when we're putting him as a top 10 pick. And I could go on for days about Carson Beck as well. Like, again, there's just idiots in this world who like to pull a race card because they have nothing better to say. And, if you really feel the need to try to knock others down by trying to make up lies like that, there's a lot of people who study psychology who would love for you to help them out and just go and, sit down and have a good conversation with them. They're called shrinks, therapists. So if you're somebody who likes to drop the racist card, get some help. It's okay. We all go through shit. Pick number 9, we got the Buccaneers going Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter's super high IQ. So, interesting. It is what it is, man. Travis Hunter, super high IQ. I am lower on him than some other people, but that's just because of the fact that I fell in love with a lot of other players. I think Travis Hunter as his zone coverage corner is going to be creme de la creme, and that is going to be very scheme dependent. So I think he's a little athletically limited, has a hard time dealing with size as well at the receiver position, but I do think he's a better corner than he is receiver, and I still think he is a starting quality corner in the NFL. Then we got Malachi Starks at pick number 10 to the Vikings. Definitely with Harrison Smith not being there for much more of the foreseeable future. It's not a pick that's ideal, but it certainly is a nice curveball. It's pretty much at this point, you put defensive interior or a corner, which is logical. So I think that's perfectly fine. But, safety is not a position that is fully built up for the future. You don't even have Lewis Seen there anymore. He's on the Jets practice squad, right? So you can't even say you're developing legitimate talent at the rate that you were. So I do think this is a interesting curveball. It's certainly interesting. And I do believe that it is something that theoretically, if the Vikings have guys that they really like down the board, they can easily exercise this option. Dalen Walker is the 11th pick going to the Seattle Seahawks. I just don't see them going back-to-back like first round defensive interiors when they have Leonard Williams as well. It just doesn't seem to make very much sense for me. I think that maybe you can go after a top tier edge rusher if you wanted to, but I think boundary corner, one of those things that if you have the right value, like Ben Morrison, I do think you could exercise it as well. Quarterback, if you're the number 11th pick, probably is going to be a position you lean. Offensive tackle, Abe Lucas, probably going to be Dunzo if he can't get healthy. And then even left tackle theoretically. This is a class where you can take a swing at offensive tackle. So there is certainly positions that I think I would prefer to go after than defensive interior. At pick 12, this is the dream scenario. You keep Ben Morrison there in Indiana, went to Notre Dame. So I'd be a big fan of this one, absolutely. Pick number 13, you got Cam Ward to the Raiders. Cam Ward has some of the highest level tape that you'll ever watch, and he also has some of the lowest. So the question is, will he be able to get and regress back towards the mean, or maybe even skew towards the positive plays? I would really hope so. I really do. I love Cam Ward, and I love what he brings to the game. He's exciting. He has those flashes that just make you really believe. But is this another Malik Willis tale where, the processing just doesn't get there because, with Malik, he freezes. Cam doesn't freeze. He just makes the wrong read. So maybe we won't have like an apples to apples scenario there, but the lack of a consistent processor is what will get you benched in the NFL, because that's what you need. You need to be able to at least process the game, which for those of y'all who think I hate Shedeur, I continuously say that Shedeur is the best processor in the class. There are just other factors, and I'm not even talking about the things that I bring up. I'm talking about the fact that he's not an elite athlete, doesn't have an elite arm, and that's okay. Like, not everybody on earth is going to have an elite arm, but it is something that could cap someone's ceiling. Cam Ward is someone who has an elite arm and is an elite athlete, but he's kind of the antithesis of Shedeur Sanders for that mark. So certainly interesting. I do think the Raiders, if Cam Ward can progress towards the positive, then I think that this could certainly be a upgradable move. It's certainly somebody in the second or third round I'd be taking the swing on for the Raiders if they don't find their guy in round number 1. Jonah Savania, right tackle out of Arizona, is the selection for the Jaguars at 14. I think that it's a bit too early for Jonah. I'm going to continue pounding the table for that. He's super new, super green, so we'll see what happens. But at the same time, I do love the idea of investing in the offensive line. I just don't really think that Jonah doesn't bring much more, in my opinion, than Javon Foster brought. And Javon was, if I'm not mistaken, a late third or a fourth round pick. And Jonah, right now, we're talking as a 14th overall pick. Not saying that's where Jonah should go. I think that both of them should have been a little bit taken closer to the 75 to 100 range. And I think Jonah should be taken at the much higher end of that range than Javon Foster, who had more experience. But regardless, Jonah is not a number 14 overall player to me just yet. T-Mac, Tetairoa McMillan goes to the Steelers at 15. Our receiving core is actually pretty damn buns. We have George Pickens, and then we're kind of being hopeful with Roman Wilson as well as Calvin Austin. But besides that, it's actually pretty damn depressing. I'll just say this right now, though. T-Mac has a bit of an overlap in his role with George Pickens. Like, George Pickens, I feel like, brings the assets that Tetairoa McMillan has and maybe a little bit more. But Tetairoa just has a couple inches in height. So I think Tetairoa could be a big impact player on certain rosters. I feel like he still could, but I'm saying that his impact would be more so minimized. It's not like he'd be a bad player, but I'm just saying what he could be would be certainly capped on the Steelers comparatively to some other teams like the Lions that I've mentioned before. Abdul Carter is the 16th pick to the Bears. A super high ceiling player, but we'll see when he ends up playing full year edge. He did not do too well as a linebacker. He was actually pretty good in zone coverage, though. I did appreciate that about him. But to me, Abdul Carter actually fits a Vic Fangio system because of the fact that he's a good athlete. You could talk about like Jalix Hunt, for example, who has 250 pounds on him, former safety. Transitioning to edge rusher, like really good athlete who can cover as well. I think that's kind of what Vic was wanting there in the third round. So for the Eagles, I could see Abdul Carter, and then Penn State, we're starting to see a little bit of a trend there as well. I could see it happening, but in the first round, man, like there needs to be a lot of progression. We're talking about him going higher than, last year with Chop Robinson, and Chop Robinson went higher than I think he probably should have. So again, we're talking about reference frames here. I think Abdul Carter's a good edge rusher, and I have him higher than most people I know in terms of my rank of him. But the people who are making mock drafts seem to be pushing this narrative, and I think it will be dying off in the near future. Quinn Ewers at 17, I agree with quarterback as an idea for the Browns. The fact that they kept 4 quarterbacks on roster, and I think they're making a quarterback move today or tomorrow. Like, it shows that they're trying to have some contingency plans in place. But to me, Quinn Ewers isn't a first-round pick. To me, he's in that later day 2 range to where, you could test out some things with Quinn, and it's just the deep ball is too inconsistent. For me, I need a quarterback to be able to make those splash plays consistently or relatively consistently, right? You can't, like, the deeper the pass, it's not very many quarterbacks are going to be able to be pinpoint every single time. I get that. There's a far higher margin of error when you're throwing 45 yards and having to hit it into a 1-foot box than if you're throwing it closer range. But Quinn Ewers, I think that he gets himself out of rhythm. I do like the fact that he can be in rhythm, and when he's in rhythm, he's very dynamic within 15 yards. But again, there needs to be a better balance to his game, I think, in terms of that long ball being more effective. At 18, Luther Burden gets selected to the Chargers. You're going to have to put him on the boundary. I don't know if he even gets 1,000 yards receiving this year. You might want to watch out for that right now based on UnderDog, which again, feel free to use the link. Get yourself up to 1,000 bonus cash on your boy. You can end up putting the bet, and I think it's like 1,050 yards is higher or lower. And, it's something where you got to think, if a receiver doesn't get over 1,000 yards, are they going to be a legitimate contender for the first round? I think Luther is one of those guys who can break that rule, but at the same time, like, let's not act like he's going to be a stat patter the entire year. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a mix-up in terms of roles with Ladd McConkey, who's going to be that primary slot. I'd want Luther Burden to be almost a combination of, like, basically a better version of Malachi Corley, I think is the vision for Luther Burden, and we'll see what happens. But I just think it's just not the type of guy who I want on the boundary. To me, I really want him to be a better version of Malachi Corley. Harold Perkins then goes to the Falcons. I guess you're going to be using him as an edge rusher. It's going to be interesting to see how he's deployed, but you are getting yourself a Swiss Army knife who just needs to add some more size. The Rams getting Connor Wigman is perfect. To me, I think that if they can end up landing Connor Wigman, I think that McVay stays and will stay maybe for another 5+ years, because Connor Wigman has the highest ceiling out of the quarterbacks in the class if he can stay healthy. Denzel Burke for the Dolphins at 21. Solid move. Mr. Do-It-All very, very well. I have no concerns with him at all. At 22, the Cowboys go Emory Jones. Do they need a right tackle after this year? I don't think they do. So I guess you could try to move him into guard if Zach Martin doesn't want to stay for the long run. That would be the only case where I could see this being logical. Receiver certainly is something you should be looking at. Noah Brown didn't even come to the squad. He ended up going to the Commanders, which is a big surprise to me, but I digress. I think Emory Jones, if Zach Martin says, hey, I'm going to hang up my cleats, like, we didn't make a good push into the playoffs, then it's a very smart move, because I think he could step in right away and have a Tyler Smith-esque impact. But I do think it's a bit of an oversight there. Emeka Egbuka, I really hope he bounces back. Just was not himself last year in terms of injuries. But, unfortunately, injuries and availability are the best ability, right? So, or lack of injuries, I should have said. But I do think Emeka Egbuka, when fully healthy, does have the potential to be something special. But don't try to act like he is going to be a slot weapon. Like, his worst year, his most banged up year, was when he played in the slot. His best year, which this might not be a good sign, was when he had Marvin Harrison Jr. as well as Jackson Smith and Jigba being able to play next to him. That's where he was able to thrive the most. Siobhan Revell is pick number 24 for the Green Bay Packers, corner out of Eastern Carolina. He's a really solid athlete. He ended up grading out as my corner 14. He's just he's very well built. I do like that about his game. So we'll see what happens with him, because he could be someone who does end up going into this range. Shout out to Broshmo for talking about him, but definitely somebody to keep your eye out on. At 25, you got Tyleik Williams going to the Jets. I don't really see defensive interior being the biggest first round need, but this is a good note here. Javon Kinlaw, Solomon Thomas, both in the final year of their contracts. Not like that's going to be ooh, shiver me timbers. No. But at the same time, you know, you could be looking for some extra rotation there on the defensive interior. So I do not fully shame it. Nick Scarton goes at pick number 26. I love Nick. I'll say it. I'm a number 4 player in the class. I mean, I think that this dude's going to be dynamite, and he's going to fall to this range because of the fact that Texas A&M just doesn't really allow their defenders to truly be themselves, in my opinion. So, we'll leave it there. But for the Bengals to get another edge rusher who has this exact same frame as Miles Murphy, and Miles Murphy was my number 1 player coming into that year, it scares the shit out of me. I'm just going to be honest. They have not shown the ability to develop top-end edge talent. They've been really good at developing, more so the underrated edge talent, which is interesting, to say the least. JT Tuimoloau is at pick number 27 for the Texans. I don't really think edge rusher is going to be a position they're going to be looking at very early at all. I think that the smartest move for this team would either to be retooling with a better defensive interior or even a linebacker at this point. Tyler Booker goes to the Eagles at 28. I mean, if you do think about it, I'm pretty sure that Mekhi Becton's gone after this year. You certainly could be in the market if Tyler Steen doesn't work out for an upgraded offensive line, and Tyler Booker's awesome. For me, it would be in a heartbeat over Tyler Booker, who I have noticeably higher, Jaden Roberts, because he's a right guard who has right tackle potential. I'd be preferring to go after that. Landon Jackson is the pick at 29 for the Lions. I just think that he is he's not worth it at pick 29. He's a fun player, but it's very rare that you'll see someone of this frame and overall size be able to really make it in the NFL, and I don't think his talent can overmatch those concerns. But I do like the idea of an edge. At pick 30, you got Quinshon Judkins going to the Ravens. There's just too many running backs in the Ravens right now, man. To take a first-round running back, it doesn't make very much sense. And I love Quinshon. You guys know this. He is somebody who I had ranked fairly highly, and it's just he was in a cluster of really good running backs. At pick 31, Colson Loveland goes to the Niners. It's the perfect pick. I would say maybe theoretically, if you can wait to the second round and end up getting Mitchell Evans, who's coming off a leg injury, then I do think that would be a smarter move because I think he's a better blocker. But Colson Loveland's a fantastic receiving tight end who can block as well. And then at 32, Kansas City goes Danny Stutzman, linebacker at Oklahoma. I doubt they'll be targeting linebacker because if they really thought that linebacker was a primary focus of theirs, they would not have gotten rid of Curtis Jacobs, who actually had some really good flashes. So I feel like they're pretty damn comfortable even with their depth. So that is going to be the video. It turns out there's not a second round. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all. See you on the far side. Peace.